This place suits you better. Don't come back.
You never saw who I was. You never even tried.
I'm the verified Hargrove beneficiary. Everything ends today.
That is impossible. This can't be happening.
We're finished. It's over. You finally came home. You were never forgotten.
I found myself. I don't need anyone else's approval anymore.
He didn't shout. He didn't slam doors or spin the tires on his way out. Patrick Cole set Lena's suitcase beneath the blue sign of Linden House Women's Shelter, with the same careful hands he used to close a business deal. Deliberate, clean, final. Her cards were already cancelled. The locks were already changed. The divorce papers were already folded inside her coat pocket. He had planned this the way he planned everything. Quietly, in advance, while she sat beside him at dinner and had no idea what he was building against her. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. But the night at Linden House had started long before the rain. The shelter was on a side street 3 blocks from downtown Denver's Central Library. Lena had walked past it once, years before she was married, and thought nothing of the blue sign. Now it was the only light she was walking toward. Patrick stood beside the car with his umbrella open, his suit dry and deliberate. He watched her lift the suitcase handle and take one step back from the curb, as if she had simply stepped away from a counter after finishing a transaction. His expression was controlled, but something moved across it when she didn't cry or reach for him or say his name. "You'll be better off here," he said. "This place suits you." The words moved through her slowly, the way cold water moves through a closed fist, her level. Not the glass-walled venue downtown, where he had just accused her in front of 200 investors with a microphone and a prepared folder. Not the investor tables where he had once thanked her for catching an easement clause that saved his first deal 3 weeks from closing. This place, a shelter, a blue sign, a locked door in the rain. Diane Voss sat in the front seat of Patrick's car with her posture composed and her hands folded in her lap. She did not look at Lena. She didn't need to. Her satisfaction was in the stillness. Barbara Cole, Patrick's mother, was not in the car. She had already left the gala to handle other things meaning the version of this story that she and Patrick had agreed on together before tonight's program began. Patrick pulled his card case from his jacket, opened it, and held out a single business card. His attorney's number. "Contact him through proper channels," he said. "Don't come to the house." Lena took the card. She did not speak. He got back into the car. Diane looked straight ahead. The car moved from the curb, tires quiet over wet pavement, and disappeared around the corner into the dark. Lena stood still for a moment in the rain. Her coat was already soaked through the shoulders. She had been standing in the rain for a while. She realized since the gala, since the moment security approached from the side of the room, and she made the calculation that her best move was composure. That was what her mother had always said. Panic gives cruel people rhythm. Inside, the shelter lobby smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee. A woman at the intake desk looked up, late 50s, silver-streaked hair, the kind of calm that came from years of watching people arrive on the worst night of their lives. "Come in out of the rain," the woman said. "You're safe here." Lena's voice caught before she could answer. She set the suitcase down. Her hands were wet, and when she reached up to unclasp her coat collar, the platinum compass pendant slipped free from beneath her shirt and swung forward on its chain. The woman behind the desk went very still. Lena noticed. She looked at the woman, at her eyes, at the careful way they fixed on the pendant, and did not move. The pendant was small and old, its platinum casing worn smooth in places. The crest pressed into its face showed an eagle with spread wings, a mountain peak beneath it, and a thin arc of Latin text along the bottom. Lena had never been able to read the Latin with certainty. Her mother had told her it meant something about what is given once. She had worn it under her clothing every day since her mother died. because it was the last thing Claire Hargrove had pressed into her hands before she stopped breathing. "My name is Agnes Whitfield," the woman said very quietly. "I'm the director here." She paused. "May I ask, what was your mother's name?" The question caught Lena off balance. No one asked that question. Not anymore. "Claire," Lena said. "Claire Hargrove, before she married." Agnes reached across the desk and picked up the pendant gently, with both hands, the way someone handles evidence. She turned it once beneath the desk lamp. The eagle, the mountain, the Latin arc caught the light. Agnes set the pendant back in Lena's palm and closed Lena's fingers around it. "Your grandfather has been looking for you," Agnes said. "He told me years ago that if you ever came through that door, I was supposed to call someone." She reached beneath the counter. Not for a form or a key card, for the phone that she kept in that locked drawer. And I think tonight is that night. Lena stood in the lobby with a dead debit card, divorce papers, and rain in her shoes, and felt something underneath the hurt that was not quite fear and not quite hope. It was the quiet before a door opens. Agnes dialed, and when someone answered on the other end, her voice shifted, more formal, more deliberate, the voice of a person fulfilling a promise kept for a very long time. "This is Agnes Whitfield at Linden House," she said. "I have a woman here with the Hargrove pendant. Her name is Lena." "Yes." A pause. "Yes. Tonight." Agnes led her to a small office behind the intake desk and closed the door between them and the lobby's noise. There was a space heater in the corner, 2 chairs, a coffee maker on a metal cart, and a narrow window that looked out onto a wet parking lot. It was not much, but it had a lock, and for the first time in hours, Lena sat down without anyone watching her face for weakness. Agnes brought her a towel and a cup of coffee without being asked. She sat across from Lena and did not speak first, which was its own kind of patience. Outside, rain moved across the window glass in slow diagonal lines. Lena thought about the first year of the marriage. Patrick had been different then. Or maybe not different. Maybe she had just not seen the full shape of who he was yet. The way you don't see the outline of a hill until the fog lifts. They had met when both of them were still building something from nothing. He was a junior developer chasing his first commercial deal in Denver's South Corridor. And she was a historical preservation consultant working out of a leased office above a print shop, spending her days with old courthouse files, county survey maps, and deed ledgers that most people treated like waste paper. He had come to her for help. A land record from 1948 that no one else could decode. She had decoded it in 40 minutes. He had asked her to dinner that night and told her she had the rarest skill he had ever seen, the ability to read what other people didn't notice. She had married him believing that. For 3 years it was a good marriage, or near enough. He was ambitious and she accepted that. He was reserved and he found it interesting. For a while, he told friends she was different from the women in his world. She didn't perform for rooms. She didn't announce herself. He said it like it was something he admired. He liked that quality until it stopped being useful. The first shift came with Meridian Heights. The project was Patrick's largest, a luxury mixed-use development in Denver's tech corridor, projected at $180 million if the Alderton capital funding cleared. He started working later, sleeping with his laptop open, snapping when Lena asked simple questions. He started using the word "we" differently. "We need discipline," he'd say, or "we can't afford distractions." And the "we" no longer meant the two of them. Diane Voss arrived 6 months before the gala. She was introduced as a strategic consultant, polished, focused, with a way of making every recommendation sound inevitable. She knew which investors mattered and how they wanted to feel in a room. She knew which restaurants made people feel powerful and which made them feel like they were being managed. She knew exactly how to flatter Patrick in ways that didn't sound like flattery. Lena noticed quickly. The signs were ordinary in the way that ordinary things always are, until you line them up. Patrick stopped asking Lena to review zoning documents. He started locking his laptop before she entered the room. He bought 3 new suits in 1 month and called them necessary. He came home carrying the faint trace of Diane's perfume, a particular gardenia note that was expensive and distinctive, and acted mildly insulted when Lena commented on it once. Barbara, Patrick's mother, began visiting more often, bringing folders and guest lists, and the specific energy of a woman who believed her family was finally ascending into rooms that had previously kept them out. She told Lena once, during a family dinner, that Lena had not been warned about in advance. Diane understands how this works. She doesn't get sentimental about what the project needs. Lena had set down a serving dish and said nothing. She had learned years before that Barbara collected reactions, the way some people collected art, to put on display later. There were things Patrick had never known. He did not know that Lena had been born Lena Hargrove Cole. He did not know that her mother, Claire, had once carried a different last name and a family history she had walked away from before Lena came into the world. He did not know that the platinum opus pendant Lena wore every day was not sentimental jewelry. It was a piece of the Hargrove family structure, pressed into Claire's hands by her father Franklin, when she left, as a way of saying, "Wherever you go, this door is still yours." Lena had spent her adult life not walking through that door. Her mother had taught her, and then her mother's absence had reinforced it. Some names carry weight that reshapes every room you enter. She had wanted to be chosen before anyone knew what she carried. She had wanted Patrick to see her, not the name behind her. He had stopped seeing her long before he stopped pretending to. For over a year, she had ignored calls from Hargrove Estate Council. The voicemails were polite, careful, never urgent in a way that alarmed her, but their consistency had. She had erased them one by one, telling herself that her grandfather's world was not her world, that Claire had had her reasons, that Lena had built a life that belonged to her and not to a family she had never met. Then, 8 weeks before the gala, she had walked past Patrick's desk to drop off a file he had asked for and seen the email preview light up on his open laptop screen. Alderton Capital, Hargrove Legacy Review, board clearance required. She had stood very still. She had not said anything. She had walked back to her own office and sat with that name for 3 days. Before she understood what it might mean, and another 3 days before she understood that understanding it might already be too late. Agnes set a second cup of coffee on the desk beside Lena's first, which had gone cold. "You don't have to explain everything tonight," Agnes said. "But there is someone coming who will want to listen when you're ready." Lena looked at the pendant still in her hand. She thought about Diane's fingers going through her bag at the gala, finding nothing. She thought about the photograph she had taken of her broken office drawer 3 days ago, still saved on her phone. She was not as unprepared as Patrick believed. She had simply been waiting to understand what she was preparing for. 3 weeks before the gala, Patrick told Lena there was a private investor dinner connected to the Meridian Heights project. He said it was held at a downtown restaurant, the kind with leather booths and waiters who spoke quietly, and that she should come because it would look better if they appeared united. That word stayed with her on the drive over, appeared. The restaurant's back room was already half full when they arrived. Lena scanned the table before she sat down, which was a habit from years of working with documents where placement always carried meaning. Name cards, arranged with care. Patrick near the center, beside an open chair. Diane already seated to his left, wearing a suit the color of slate, smooth and expensive without being loud. Lena's card was at the far end, beside Barbara's events assistant, and an empty chair meant for someone who had cancelled. Barbara stood near the wine display in cream and gold, greeting investors with the warmth she saved for people she needed to impress. When she saw Lena pause at the table arrangement, she smiled. "Sit at the end tonight, dear," she said. "Real partners have to discuss real money." Diane lowered her eyes to her folder. Lena saw the corner of her mouth move. Lena sat. The man across from her was silver-haired, in his late 60s, with rimless glasses and the patient expression of someone who had been in a great many important rooms. When Barbara said Lena's name in passing, he looked up from the bread plate. "Lena Cole?" he asked. His tone was different from the others at the table, more careful, like someone checking a reference against memory. "Yes," Lena said. He studied her for a moment longer than was polite. "Any relation to Claire Hargrove?" Patrick was already reaching for the wine list. He did not hear it, but Diane did. Her head lifted slightly. "Just a degree, just enough. She was my mother," Lena said. The man's expression softened into something between recognition and regret. "I see. Then I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." Patrick laughed from down the table. Not at the exchange, he had missed it entirely. He laughed at something Diane had said. The sound was easy and genuine in a way that hadn't been directed at Lena in a long time. Dinner began. Diane opened her folder before the salads arrived and moved the conversation with practiced efficiency. She discussed market positioning, Alderton Capital's review expectations, clean financials, and controlled optics. She used words like discipline and liability exposure in the same breath. At one point, she described Lena's archive consulting work as non-revenue personal activity, without looking at Lena when she said it. She described household spending records as mixed-use financial exposure and suggested that Patrick would benefit from separating private distractions from public growth. Lena kept her hands in her lap and said very little. Then Diane turned a page in her presentation folder. Lena saw the photocopy, a corner of an old waterfront easement document. A margin note written in Lena's handwriting, a zoning reference from a county archive she had pulled 2 months earlier during a separate consultation project, filed in the locked drawer of her home office. Her breathing went careful and slow. Diane had been inside her office, not guessing inside, had taken the time to identify the right documents, copy the portions that would strengthen Patrick's pitch, and return everything to look undisturbed. All except the fact that the margin notes were in Lena's handwriting, and the easement cross-references were from a file Diane had no professional reason to access. Lena looked down the table at Patrick. He was watching Diane present with the expression of a man who had completely outsourced his own awareness. He had no idea what Diane was holding. By the end of dinner, Lena had said only enough to be polite. She thanked the waiter. She folded her napkin. She let Barbara's parting comment, "You did well enough by staying quiet," pass through her without answering. In the car going home, Patrick talked about the meeting with the warm excitement of someone who believed the hardest part was behind him. He did not ask Lena what she thought. He did not ask if she was all right. When they reached the house, he went to his office to take a call with Diane, and Lena went to her own. The lock on her desk drawer had been forced. It had been reset carefully. Someone had pushed the mechanism back into place, but the metal around the entry point showed small scratches that had not been there before. Inside, her folders were in the wrong order. Documents had been shifted, scanned, and replaced. She could tell by the alignment and by the paper's heat, still faintly warmer than files that had been sitting undisturbed. Only the pendant case in the bottom corner was untouched. Lena did not confront Patrick that night. She sat at her desk for a long time after he went to sleep, and she thought about the silver-haired investor's face when he heard her mother's name. She thought about the email preview she had seen on Patrick's laptop, Hargrove Legacy Review, and about the way Diane's head had come up when Lena said Claire Hargrove. Diane had copied documents from a locked drawer. She had used them in a professional presentation. She had described Lena's presence in the marriage as a liability. Lena opened her phone and photographed the drawer, then the shifted folders, then the timestamps on the documents that showed they had been handled recently. She did not confront Patrick that night or the next. She wrote down 3 names: the silver-haired investor, Gerald Marsh, Alderton Capital, Hargrove Legacy Review. She wrote down the date and time, and then she opened the small cedar box she kept behind a row of archive binders and took out an unopened envelope with the return address of the Hargrove Estate Council, the one she had intercepted from the mail 3 weeks ago, before Patrick or Diane could find it. She did not open it, not yet. She put it in her coat lining, where Diane had not been able to reach. The Meridian Heights Investor Gala was held at a glass-walled venue 2 blocks from the river, the kind of space built to make people feel they were already inside the future, that the project was promising. White orchids in tall vases, waiters moving through warm light with deliberate grace. A scale model of the development near the entrance, small buildings arranged around a polished strip of riverfront that looked, from a certain angle, like it had already been built. Lena wore a simple dark dress she had chosen on purpose. Not plain because she was ashamed. Plain because she was not going to be decoration for people who already treated her like furniture. Barbara arrived before them and took her position near the entrance in champagne silk, greeting guests with the practiced warmth of someone who had been rehearsing this night for years. When she saw Lena, she touched her sleeve briefly and said, "You could have made more effort." Lena pulled her arm back gently. "I made enough." Barbara's smile tightened. Across the room, Diane moved through investors with the ease of someone at home. She greeted men by first name, touched women's arms lightly, laughed at Patrick's jokes before Lena heard the punchline. Her badge read strategic consultant, but no one in the room treated her like staff. They treated her like a decision that had already been made. The first hour passed under soft music and softer insults. Patrick introduced Lena to investors only when proximity made it unavoidable. When one of them called Lena your partner, Barbara smiled and clarified, "Patrick has many professional partners. Lena is his wife." The words were correct and the meaning was a blade. Then Patrick stepped to the small stage. He thanked the investors. He thanked Alderton Capital for their ongoing review. He thanked Barbara for what she called the Price family's commitment to civic development. He thanked Diane for bringing discipline to the deal. His voice was warm, rehearsed, and landing exactly where he wanted it to land. Then it changed. "Before we move forward tonight," he said, "there is one internal matter I want to address openly. Private project documents were accessed from my home office without authorization. We believe it was a deliberate breach of the project's security protocol." The room went quiet in the way crowds do when private pain becomes public entertainment. Diane walked toward the stage, carrying a folder. She projected 2 images on the screen at the side of the room, blurred screenshots of account statements, a fragment of an easement note in handwriting that Lena recognized as her own, a list of household expenses reframed as irregular account activity. None of it proved what Patrick was implying. But proof was not the point. The point was the room watching Lena's face to see if she would break. Barbara stepped forward from the side of the room. She was holding a cream envelope. She set it on the signing table beside the project model. Lena saw the top line before anyone spoke. "Divorce papers. We tried to handle this privately," Patrick said, "but these actions have placed this project and this family at real risk." Security moved from the edge of the room. Diane set the folder down and looked at Lena with something that had been designed to look like regret. Patrick stepped down from the stage and came close enough to speak without the microphone. "Don't make this harder," he said. "Sign and leave quietly." Lena looked at the papers. She looked at Diane. She looked at Barbara, whose face carried no visible shame. "No," she said. One word, calm and clear. Patrick's jaw tightened. Diane's hand moved. "Then we need to check your bag before you leave," Diane said, softly, professionally, as if this were a reasonable security measure. The room watched. Lena could feel phones lifting. She could feel the particular silence of people deciding what story they were going to tell about this later. She let the bag go. She had already moved her hand to her coat pocket, where the compass pendant was safe in the lining beside the unopened Hargrove estate envelope. Diane searched the bag in front of everyone. She found the divorce papers that Lena had brought from the signing table, a dead debit card, and her phone. She handed the bag back as if she had proven something. Outside the venue, the rain had started. Patrick's car was already at the curb. Lena tried her debit card at the ride app. Declined. She tried the second card, declined. She opened her banking app. The joint account showed restricted access, modified less than 2 hours ago, before the gala program had even reached Patrick's remarks. He had planned this before he arrived. He was already in the car when Lena walked out. He did not say anything on the drive. He did not look at her in the mirror. Diane was not in this car. She had her own. Barbara had already left for her hotel. It was only Patrick and Lena and the sound of tires on wet pavement and the particular silence of a man who had rehearsed what came next. He pulled up to the blue sign. He got out. He lifted her suitcase from the trunk. She had not known it was there, and set it on the sidewalk beneath the shelter sign with his deliberate closing of file hands. "You'll be better off here," he said. "This place suits you." Lena stepped back from the curb, one small movement, toward the shelter instead of toward him, and something shifted in his expression. Not much, but enough. He got into the car, he drove, and Lena stood in the rain with a dead bank card and her mother's pendant and a sealed letter that Diane had never found, and turned toward the only light that was still on. Agnes did not push. That, more than anything, was what made Lena's throat tighten. She had expected questions, intake forms, the careful bureaucracy of a place built to process people at their worst moment. Agnes gave her a towel and a chair and silence, and when she spoke again, she spoke like someone fulfilling an obligation she had been given long ago. "Your mother came to this shelter once," Agnes said. "Not as a resident, as a donor." She set her coffee cup down carefully. 11 years ago, Linden House was facing a funding cut that would have cost us our legal aid program. We were 2 weeks from closing that department. Your grandfather's foundation provided the emergency grant that kept it open. She paused. Franklin Hargrove never asked for anything in return. He just said, "If you ever see a woman come through the door wearing this pendant, you call us." She reached into the desk drawer and set a card on the surface between them. Old paper. The Hargrove family crest, embossed in black ink. Below it, a phone number in Claire's handwriting. "Your mother left this here the year before she died," Agnes said. "She also left something for you." Agnes opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and removed an envelope. The paper had aged at the edges. Lena's name was written across the front in Claire Hargrove's careful, unadorned hand. Lena stared at it for a long time before she reached for it. Agnes waited. The envelope unsealed cleanly. Inside was a single page, folded once. Her mother's handwriting, smaller and more deliberate than the name on the outside, the handwriting of someone who had thought carefully about every word. "Lena, if you are reading this because someone used money or shelter to control you, stop protecting them. Call the lawyer. Answer the questions. Do not let shame make you loyal to a lie. I kept the Hargrove name from you because I wanted you to have a life that wasn't shaped by what I couldn't resolve. I was wrong about your grandfather. Not about everything, but about the part that mattered most. He is not a man who buys people. He is a man who made a mistake and did not know how to say it until it was too late for me to hear it. You are not too late. The pendant is yours. The door it opens is yours. You don't have to walk through it if you don't want to. But if you've run out of other doors, please stop standing in the rain. I love you. I should have said it in person. I'm saying it now." Lena pressed 2 fingers to the page and held them there. The space heater in the corner clicked on. Outside the window, the rain had not stopped. Agnes gave her the time it took to fold the letter back. Then she said, "With your permission, I'd like to make a call." "All right," Lena said. Agnes picked up the Schultz Direct line, not a cell phone, but the old landline on the desk, and dialed the number from the card. When someone answered, her voice changed into the measured formality of a person keeping a promise that had been waiting for a decade. "This is Agnes Whitfield at Linden House," she said. "I have Lena Cole in my office." "Yes, she's here with the pendant." A pause. Tonight, she arrived with cancelled cards, a changed lock, and divorce papers. "There was a public incident at an investor event. She has documentation." Another pause, longer. "I understand. Yes, thank you." Agnes ended the call and looked at Lena steadily. "They're sending someone tonight," she said. Her name is Margaret Chen. She's an estate attorney. She represents Hargrove Estate Council. Lena was quiet for a moment. I don't know anything about that structure, she said. I've spent my whole life not knowing. I know, Agnes said. That was your mother's choice. Margaret will explain what it means now. Lena looked down at the letter in her hands. Then she took out her phone. 40% battery. The only account she had access to was the small personal savings she had always kept separate, the one Patrick had not known about, and opened her photo library. The photographs were still there, the broken drawer, the shifted folders, the investor dinner program, timestamp. She had taken them 3 days ago, methodically, without rushing, because her mother had always said, if you're afraid, write things down. If you're threatened, keep the facts. The facts are yours even when nothing else is. She pulled up her banking app. The joint account still showed restricted access. She took a screenshot of that too. Then she photographed the shelter intake form that Agnes had quietly set in front of her. The date, the time, the condition of arrival. There's one more thing, Agnes said. She was looking at her phone now, not the desk phone, but her own. Her expression had shifted from patient to alert. I just received an alert through a compliance service I subscribe to for grant documentation. Alderton Capital's public filing portal shows a new attachment submitted to a review package tonight. The account name is Cole, P. Cole, and the attachment was submitted 47 minutes ago. Lena set down her phone. He submitted the new package tonight? Tonight? It looks like he did, Agnes said. I can't see what's inside it from here. But if he included the documents from your office, he did, Lena said. She was already certain. Diane had copied those easement notes for exactly this purpose. He submitted my research as part of his own package. Agnes folded her hands on the desk and said nothing. Lena looked at the pendant still in her palm. Small and old and heavier than it looked, just as her mother had described it. Margaret Chen was coming. There was a paper trail in Lena's phone, and a sealed letter from her mother and a shelter director who had kept a promise for 11 years. Patrick believed he had disposed of a powerless woman. He had not taken the time to wonder why she hadn't fought back. Margaret Chen arrived before midnight. She wore a charcoal coat and carried a briefcase that was old and expensive, and had clearly been used for its actual purpose rather than as a signal. She was in her mid-50s, with reading glasses pushed up to her hairline and the unhurried calm of someone who had left important rooms before in order to get to more important ones. She did not rush to comfort Lena. She did not call her by her first name without asking. She set a card on the desk, sat across from Agnes, and looked at Lena directly. My name is Margaret Chen, she said. I represent Hargrove Estate Council. Before anything else, I need you to understand that you are not required to claim any name, sign any document, or accept any form of representation tonight. I'm here because a condition was met, and because the Council takes that condition seriously. Whether you choose to engage further is entirely your decision. Lena studied her for a moment. Then why did you drive here at midnight? Margaret looked at her steadily. Because certain events can trigger a protective review. Financial abandonment, coercion, interference with private property. What happened tonight may qualify. We document first, we verify before we act. That is how the Council operates. That was the most honest thing anyone had said to Lena in the past 6 hours. Ask your questions, Lena said. Margaret opened her legal pad. Lena gave her the full timeline, careful, precise, in the order things had happened. The investor dinner 3 weeks ago. Diane's presentation using research from Lena's locked home office. The broken drawer photographed 3 days before the gala. The gala itself. Patrick's public accusation, the screenshots Diane projected, Barbara's divorce papers, security approaching from the side of the room, Diane searching her bag, the cards cancelled before the gala ended, the home locks changed, the drive to Linden House, Patrick's parting words and the suitcase set beneath the blue sign, then the shelter, Agnes, her mother's letter, the compliance alert about the Alderton submission. Margaret wrote everything down and asked only clarifying questions about time and sequence. When Lena finished, Margaret closed her pen. "There are 2 things I want to confirm with you," she said. "First, did Patrick have your authorization to use your archive research in any professional submission?" "No," Lena said. "Those were my personal working files, my own consultancy. Nothing to do with his project." "Second, did Diane Voss have legitimate access to your home office?" She had never been given permission to enter it. Lena pulled out her phone and showed Margaret the photographs, the drawer, the scratches around the lock mechanism, the shifted folders, the timestamp on the photos. 3 days before the gala, Margaret looked at each image in sequence. She did not express surprise. "I'm going to make 2 calls," she said. "The first is to a document preservation contact at Alderton Capital's compliance office. We will use careful language, no accusations, no family information, only a notification that an attachment in a recent submission may constitute unauthorized use of proprietary personal research and is connected to pending marital litigation." That's enough to trigger a hold. She made the call. 3 minutes. Controlled, precise, no drama. "The second call," Margaret said when she hung up, "is to a private investigator I work with. His name is Tom Okafor. He worked in financial compliance for 12 years before going independent. He follows paper, not rumors." She made that call too, short, direct. "I need Tom. Tonight if he's awake. Alderton Capital, a Meridian Heights funding package, and a possible shell structure. Tell him it's the Hargrove matter." She ended it. Lena's phone buzzed. 3 messages from Patrick. She read them without responding. The first: "You made a fool of yourself tonight. I hope you're satisfied." The second, 20 minutes later: "My attorney will contact you Monday. Do not come to the house." The third, arriving just before Margaret finished her second call: "If you try to involve anyone in this, you will regret it." Lena took screenshots of all 3. She did not reply to any of them. That was her first boundary. Small, silent and real. Margaret looked at the phone. "Save those," she said. "Don't respond. Everything that comes next should go through counsel." She paused, then said it differently. "I know that is frustrating when someone says something cruel and you want to answer it on your own terms." "I want to answer it correctly," Lena said. "That's different." Margaret allowed herself a small nod of something like respect. Then she said, "There is one thing you should know about the Hargrove structure before Tom arrives in the morning." She set her legal pad on the desk and turned to a clean page. "Hargrove Capital Partners was founded by your grandfather, Franklin Hargrove, 32 years ago. Over the course of that time, he made several significant capital placements through what the council refers to as the Hargrove Legacy Fund. One of those placements was an early investment in Alderton Capital Partners, 17 years ago, a seed investment that came with a stewardship provision." Lena looked at her. "The provision designated a Hargrove family seat in Alderton's Trust Review Committee," Margaret continued. "Not a controlling vote, but a participation right, meaning any Alderton investment above a threshold amount requires a clearance step through the trust review before final approval can be granted. The seat has been vacant since your mother left the family structure. Your grandfather refused to allow anyone else to fill it." The room was quiet. Lena heard the hum of the space heater, the distant sound of the shelter settling for the night. "Patrick's Meridian Heights project," she said slowly, "is above the threshold," Margaret said, "by a significant margin. He's been chasing Alderton funding for 8 months, Lena said, and the trust review clearance has been listed as pending for the past 3 review cycles," Margaret said, "because the seat has been vacant." She paused. "Your verification as a direct Hargrove descendant through the estate documents Agnes filed tonight, the family records I already have on file, and the pendant's crest, which matches the council's authentication records, is legally sufficient to activate the seat." Lena sat very still. Patrick had cancelled her cards, changed her locks, had her searched in front of his investors, and left her in the rain on the same night that he needed a clearance she was now the only person alive qualified to provide. Margaret gave her a moment. Then she said, quietly, "You don't have to do anything with that tonight. Get some sleep if you can. Tom will be here at 8. We'll know more about the Alderton submission by then." Lena looked at the pendant in her coat pocket. She looked at her mother's letter on the desk. "My grandfather," she said. "Is he? Does he know what happened tonight?" "The council notified his care team when Agnes called," Margaret said. "He knows you're safe." She paused. "He asked that they pass along a message. He said, 'I know it's not enough, but I'm sorry for what Claire had to carry alone.'" Lena pressed her lips together. She did not answer. After a moment, she said, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, Margaret confirmed. Lena put her mother's letter into her coat pocket beside the pendant. She picked up her suitcase. Agnes showed her to a small private room at the back of the shelter, with a narrow bed and a metal lamp and a dresser with one drawer that stuck halfway. It was clean and locked, and no one was going to search through it at midnight. That was enough for now. Tom Okafor arrived at 8 with coffee for everyone and no attempt at comfort he hadn't earned. He was a lean man in his early 60s, grey at the temples, wearing a plain navy jacket and the quiet alertness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where the most important evidence wasn't visible from the door. He introduced himself, asked Lena's permission before he opened his recording app, and placed a clean legal pad on Agnes's desk. "Start at the dinner," he said. 3 weeks ago. Walk me through it in order." Lena did. She gave him the investor dinner, the broken drawer, the photographs, the gala, the timeline down to the minute. Tom did not interrupt except to clarify sequence. When she finished, he turned to Margaret. "If the Alderton submission includes an archive note with Lena's handwriting or her margin notes, there's a metadata trail." He opened his laptop. File creation date, the editing account, the upload timestamp. If Diane accessed Lena's office and scanned the document on her own device, that device's fingerprint may be in the metadata. "Can you access that?" Margaret asked. "I can access Alderton's public compliance portal. Anything in the pending review hold would be visible to parties with standing." He looked at Lena. "Margaret has standing as your representative. That's enough." He pulled up the portal, navigated through 2 verification screens, and found the submission under P. Cole, Meridian Heights Development, filed at 11:14 p.m. the previous evening. The attachment list showed 3 files. The third was labeled Supplemental Research, Historic Easement Cross-Reference, Annexed. Tom opened the metadata panel. File created 22 days ago, device registered to DVOS, Mercer Strategic Advisory. Margaret did not react visibly. Lena looked at the screen and felt something cold and clarifying move through her chest. Not surprise. Exactly, but the particular sensation of a suspicion becoming a fact. So, Diane scanned the document from Lena's office, Tom said, not as a question, and submitted it to Alderton as supplemental research for Patrick's project. He closed the panel. The file creation date is the day after the investor dinner, 3 weeks ago. Patrick had no idea what she was handing him, Lena said. "That part, I believe," Tom said, and the way he said it made clear he did not extend the same generosity to many others. He moved to a different screen. "I started a background trace on Diane Voss last night when Margaret called. She has a registered consulting entity, Mercer Strategic Advisory, which is legitimate. She also has a second entity, registered in Delaware 18 months ago." He turned the laptop slide Cliff Solutions LLC, virtual office @slide, virtual office address. Mailing address is a registered agent service. One manager of record through a filing service. "Is Diane that manager?" Margaret asked. "Through a second-degree connection, a personal attorney who has registered other companies for similar clients. Not impossible to explain, but not clean." He clicked to the next screen. There are 2 transfers from a Patrick Culp business operating account to Cliffside Solutions, amounts that look like consulting fees. Normal range for the work. He paused. There's also one transfer out of Cliffside Solutions, going to a separate holding company connected to a rival developer who has been bidding on the same Meridian Heights district for the past year. Agnes sat very still near the filing cabinet, "How much?" Margaret asked. $40,000. A favor amount, not a purchase. The kind of number you use when you want something done without creating a headline. Tom moved to the next window, and the memo line on the outgoing transfer, usually it's blank or generic on these shell movements. He turned the screen to face Lena directly. This one had text. Lena leaned forward and read it. 4 words. Hargrove Heir, confirmed viable. She read it 3 times. No one in the room spoke. Diane had not guessed everything. She could not have known the full scope of the Hargrove Legacy Fund or the trust review structure. But she had known enough. The estate envelope that had been redirected to Lena's address. The Hargrove name surfacing in quiet places, Gerald Marsh's reaction at the dinner, the way certain doors seemed to open slightly whenever Lena was in the room. Diane had done what calculating people do when they sense an advantage they don't fully understand. She had tracked it, and she had started positioning herself to monetize it before anyone else could figure out what it was. She had taken Lena's research to strengthen Patrick's deal. She had routed a payment to a competitor as insurance, in case the deal fell apart, and she had flagged the Hargrove Heir as a viable leverage point for future use. Patrick had believed Diane was managing the project. She had been managing the exits. He thought she was helping him, Lena said. He thought a lot of things, Tom said, without cruelty. Margaret set her pen on the legal pad. We need to separate 2 things. The divorce and the trust review. They're connected emotionally. They need clean lanes legally. She looked at Lena. I recommend 3 steps. A legal hold to preserve communications and financial records. A divorce response that formally addresses the financial control and property access issues. And a notification to Alderton Capital that the Hargrove seat has been activated and that the verified beneficiary is requesting to participate in the pending review. No public announcement, Lena said immediately. Not unless you choose it, Margaret said. No warning to Patrick. Not yet, Margaret agreed. We let the paper move first. Paper with weight moves quietly. Lena looked at the laptop screen, the memo line. 4 words. Diane had looked through her bag in front of 200 people and found nothing useful. She had not known that the most important thing Lena was carrying was not in a bag. It was a name she had spent her whole life refusing to use as a weapon. She had just decided to use it as a fact instead. Do it, Lena said. All 3. Margaret did not smile. She simply picked up her phone and began. By early afternoon, Alderton Capital's compliance office had frozen the disputed attachment pending a formal trust review request. A preservation order had gone to Patrick's legal address, carefully worded and exact. Patrick's attorney had received formal notice that Lena was represented. His direct messages had stopped within the hour. No one had accused Patrick of anything. No one had shouted or made a scene. The paper moved the way paper moves when it is correct and has weight, without noise and without stopping. Tom left to pursue a secondary trace connected to the cliffside shell structure. Agnes brought sandwiches from the shelter kitchen that no one had asked for. Margaret remained at the desk with her legal pad and a second cup of coffee that had gone cold, and for a while after the calls were made, the small disaster was quiet in the way that follows real decisions. It was Lena who broke it. Tell me what the fund actually is, she said. All of it. I'm done not knowing. Margaret turned to a new page. Franklin Hargrove had founded Hargrove Capital Partners 32 years ago with a single conviction, that private capital should move toward infrastructure, and that infrastructure should be guided by people who understood land, not just money. Over 3 decades, the firm had grown into a significant regional force in Colorado and the surrounding states: real estate, infrastructure finance, conservation land trusts, urban redevelopment. Not a household name, but a respected one in specific rooms that mattered. 17 years ago, Franklin had made a seed investment in Alderton Capital Partners, a younger fund focused on mixed-use development financing, as part of what the family council called legacy stewardship. The investment came with a provision, the Hargrove Legacy Fund, through which the capital flowed. retained a designated seat on Alderton's Trust Review Committee, not a controlling vote. A participation right, the right to attend any review above the threshold amount and formally represent the fund's stewardship interest. The threshold? Lena asked. $50 million, Margaret said. Patrick's Meridian Heights package is requesting $110 million. Lena set down her coffee. The seat has been vacant for 19 years, Margaret continued. Your mother left the Hargrove structure before you were born. Your grandfather refused to allow the seat to be reassigned or filled by a proxy. He told the council that the seat belonged to the Hargrove line and that when the time came, it would be filled by the person it was meant for. He was waiting for me, Lena said. He was waiting for your terms, Margaret said carefully. There is a distinction. He did not want you coerced into the structure. He did not want you to feel that accepting the seat meant accepting a debt or a relationship you weren't ready for. But he also could not let anyone else sit there. Lena thought about her mother's letter. The difference her mother had drawn between what he was and what she couldn't forgive herself for leaving. She had thought about that line twice since reading it. What happens when the seat is filled? Lena asked. The trust review is reactivated, Margaret said. The designated beneficiary, you can attend any eligible Alderton review and formally participate. You have no obligation to vote in any particular direction. But your presence in the review is a legal requirement and for the process to proceed to final approval. The implication was clear. Patrick's Meridian Heights funding could not clear its final Alderton approval without a trust review. The trust review required the Hargrove seat to be filled. The Hargrove seat had just been activated with Lena's name. He had cancelled her cards and told her she belonged at a shelter. On the same night his project needed her to sit at a table and say nothing. She could have said nothing. She still could. She was not required to appear. She was not required to vote against him. The seat's participation right did not obligate her to use it, but it obligated Alderton to wait for her if she chose to show up. His presentation is tomorrow, Margaret said. The board chair knows a verified trust beneficiary has been activated. He's asked how you want to be listed in the review record. Lena was quiet for a long time. She looked at the pendant on the desk between them. She thought about all the years she had carried it under her clothing, against her skin, refusing to use what it represented, because she had not wanted anyone to see the name before they saw her. Patrick had not seen her, even when she had nothing. Barbara had called her furniture. Diane had called her a liability. Gerald Marsh, the silver-haired investor, who had known her mother's name, had seen her clearly in about 30 seconds at a dinner, where no one else had thought to look. She thought about walking through that door, not as a weapon, not as a performance, just as the truth of who she was, which she had spent her whole life leaving unlisted. How do they want it formatted? Lena asked. The name in the record. They have a standard designation, Margaret said. Verified Trust Beneficiary, Hargrove Legacy Fund. In connection with the trust review participation right. They would list it below your legal name. My legal name, Lena said, is Lena Hargrove Cole. My mother gave me both. She paused. I've been using Cole alone since I was 18. I can use both now. Margaret made a note. List me as Lena Cole Hargrove, Lena said. Verified trust beneficiary, nothing more. She thought for a moment. And tell the board chair I'll be there. Margaret studied her for a moment, then wrote it down. An hour later, her phone buzzed. Not Patrick, an unknown number, but the message came with a name she recognized from the care team update Margaret had mentioned. It read, "He asked me to pass this along," he said. "Come when you're ready. Not before. I'll be here." Lena read it twice. She did not write back, not yet. She folded her phone face down on the desk and sat with the feeling. Not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to it. The knowledge that someone had been holding a door open for her for a very long time without demanding that she walk through it. She would go. When this was done, when she had her own ground to stand on, and not just his floor to stand on after reclaiming it. First there was tomorrow. Outside, Agnes moved through the shelter's evening routine with the quiet competence of someone who had turned consistency into a form of protection. Down the hall, other women were making their own calculations about what came next. Lena could hear the low sound of a television, the occasional murmur of voices, a door closing gently somewhere toward the back. She thought about the woman who had run her organization's grants for 11 years and quietly held a card in a desk drawer for a decade, not out of obligation, but because she had believed in the promise. She thought about her mother writing a letter in a shelter office 1 year before she died, asking a stranger to keep it until the right night. She thought about paper. Paper was the quietest form of faith she knew. You wrote something down, and you trusted that the words would still be true when someone else found them. Tomorrow, the paper would speak in rooms where Patrick had always believed he was the only one who mattered. Patrick arrived early. He wore his best suit, the navy one he had bought 2 months ago and called a necessary expense, and came through the lobby of Alderton Capital's offices with Diane beside him and Barbara just behind. He carried himself the way he had carried himself since the gala, with the settled confidence of a man who believed the worst part of his week was already behind him. Lena was gone from the house. His attorney had been contacted. The compliance hold was procedural. Diane had told him, a formality tied to the pending divorce. A firm presentation would move past it. The glass conference room on the 14th floor was already half full when they arrived. Board members, 2 attorneys from Alderton's outside counsel, the board chair Arthur Reeves, stood near the head of the table with the expression of someone who had not yet decided how this morning would go. Diane leaned toward Patrick as they settled near their seats. "Stay focused," she said quietly. "Let me handle the language if they raise the attachment issue." Patrick nodded. Her calm made him feel in control. He had grown used to that. He did not notice that Diane kept glancing toward the door. Margaret entered first. Patrick frowned slightly. He recognized her as an attorney type, but not the specific face. Then Tom Okafor followed with a slim folder and a tablet. Patrick's jaw tightened without his permission. Then Lena walked in. No wet coat, no searched bag, no suitcase, and no rain. She wore the same quiet expression Patrick had always misread as absence, but something in the room recognized it before he did. Arthur Reeves stood. "Miss Cole Hargrove," he said with the careful respect of someone using a name for the first time who understands exactly what it means. Patrick stared. What is she doing here? His voice was controlled but not quite. Margaret did not look at him. "Miss Cole Hargrove is present in connection with the trust review. She holds the designated Hargrove Legacy Fund participation seat." She set her briefcase on the table and opened it. The seat was activated yesterday evening, following a verified estate documentation process. Barbara turned pale, first with irritation, then with something closer to fear, as she looked between Lena and the board chair and began calculating what she had missed. Diane shifted her weight and said nothing. Arthur Reeves opened a folder. "Before we proceed with the Meridian Heights presentation," he said, "Alderton Capital needs to address several material concerns related to the funding package." He nodded toward the screen at the end of the table. The first image was a timestamp from the gala, the venue, 9:47 p.m. the previous evening. Then a screenshot of Patrick's joint account showing restricted access, modified at 9:22 p.m. 25 minutes before Patrick had publicly accused Lena of financial misconduct. He had locked her accounts before he made the accusation. Patrick's expression went rigid. The second image, Agnes Whitfield's shelter intake statement dated last night, noting the time of Lena's arrival, her condition, the cancelled bank access, the changed home locks, and the presence of divorce papers. "That is a private document," Patrick said. "No," Margaret said without raising her voice. "It is a documented record of financial abandonment, connected to pending marital litigation and a funding review that subsequently received disputed materials." Tom spoke for the first time. He was looking at his tablet, the supplemental research attachment in the Meridian Heights funding package, file ID AT29MH, carries metadata indicating it was created on a device registered to Diane Voss, Mercer Strategic Advisory. 22 days ago, he set the tablet on the table so the board could see the screen. The original file source is a locked home office belonging to Lena Cole Hargrove. The notes are in her handwriting. They are not business records of Patrick Cole's firm. She contributed to that work, Patrick said. His voice had a new texture, not anger, but the elevated pitch of a man whose prepared argument was no longer fitting the room. She helped with documents at home. I can't control what Lena looked at him. He stopped. Not because she had raised her voice or moved, because she hadn't. She looked at him the way she had looked at him the night he's left her in the rain, steady, unhurried, without the flinching he had been waiting for, and the argument that had felt solid in his head lost its shape. She spoke once. "You left me at a shelter and told me it was my level," she said. "Today I'm only asking them to read the facts." No one answered. Tom moved to the next slide. The cliffside solution structure appeared on the screen, the two transfers from Patrick's operating account, the outgoing payment to the rival developer, and the memo line in full. Hargrove Air, confirmed viable. Diane's face lost its polish. It didn't collapse, it simply stopped performing. Arthur Reeves turned to her. "Ms. Voss, can you explain the cliffside solution structure and its relationship to the Meridian Heights project?" "I would need to consult with my attorney," Diane said. "That would be wise," Tom said. Barbara set both hands flat on the table. "Our hotel is listed as collateral on this package." "Yes," Arthur Reeves said, his voice measured. "That is also under review." Margaret addressed the room. "To be clear, Miss Cole Hargrove is not here to create a personal scene or make personal accusations. She has authorized a preservation review and the protection of trust interests. Given the evidence of unauthorized document use, possible misrepresentation in the submission, and collateral concerns, Alderton Capital cannot proceed with the Meridian Heights funding package at this time." The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was simply complete. Patrick remained standing as Alderton's outside counsel gathered the files from the table. Barbara sat down slowly, one hand at her throat. Diane moved toward the elevator. She pressed the button. The doors opened before she reached them. A court officer stood in the lobby beyond, holding a sealed document. He looked at the face in front of him against the name in his hand. "Diane Voss?" he asked. The confidence Diane had carried into Patrick's life, into this room, into the room at the investor dinner, into Lena's home office with a scanner and steady hands out, finally let her go. It didn't shatter, it simply drained. She took the subpoena. The room began to empty. Patrick stood beside the table with his navy suit and his prepared presentation and the future he had built on a foundation he had never bothered to verify. He watched Arthur Reeves close a folder. He watched Margaret say something quietly to Tom. He watched Lena pick up her coat from the back of a chair with the same unhurried composure she had carried into the room. He said her name. She paused. "I didn't know," he said. "About Hargrove, about any of it." Lena looked at him for a long moment. "I know," she said. She said it without anger and without pity. She said it because it was true, and because the truth was not what had broken the marriage. What had broken the marriage was in everything he had chosen to do, while knowing exactly who she was without the name, a woman who caught his legal errors, kept his secrets, and reviewed his documents at 11 o'clock at night, and deciding that none of it was worth the cost of his ambitions. She didn't say that. She didn't need to. She picked up her coat and walked out. The settlement conference was quiet in the way that follows the collapse of a story someone had built too quickly. Patrick's attorney negotiated from a position that had been hollowed by the Alderton compliance review. Meridian Heights lost its funding package. Other lenders pulled back once the compliance findings became a matter of record, not publicized, but visible to anyone in the relevant circles who cared to look. Patrick's reputation did not collapse overnight. It cracked in the rooms he had spent years trying to enter, which was in some ways worse than a clean fall. Barbara's boutique hotel entered a restructuring review after Alderton's due diligence team flagged the collateral documentation. At the settlement conference, she spoke to Lena once, without her usual altitude, without the collected composure of a woman who had spent decades deciding what other women were worth in proximity to her son. "I didn't know how far he had gone," she said. Lena looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't need to know my grandfather's name," Lena said, "to know I was a person." Barbara had no answer for that. Diane's consulting accounts were frozen pending the investigation into Cliffside Solutions and the unauthorized use of proprietary research. Her phone still rang, but now it was attorneys, not clients. The polished confidence she had carried into every room she entered became part of a paper trail that did not respond to charm. Her name disappeared from investor calls. The future she had been building through Patrick, and through the Hargrove connection she had been quietly mapping, went with it. Patrick tried to contact Lena once more before the settlement was finalized. He sent a message through his attorney, asking if they could speak privately without counsel, just to have a conversation outside of the legal process. Lena sent her answer through Margaret. No, not cruelly, simply clearly. The marriage ended through documents and a court-supervised financial review. No single paper resolved the damage. What paper never does is undo the specific weight of standing in a room while someone who promised to choose you every day uses a microphone to make strangers doubt your worth. What the papers did was return her legal ground, piece by piece, each verified fact functioning like a handhold in a wall she was still climbing. She climbed it. 3 weeks after the settlement, Lena drove to the care facility where her grandfather lived. Franklin Hargrove was 81, seated in a hospital chair by a window that looked out over a courtyard of bare trees. He was smaller than she had expected, diminished in the way of people whose energy has contracted to what is essential. But his eyes were clear, and when she came through the door, something in them released, the way breath releases when you have been waiting a long time to let it go. They did not have an easy conversation. There was too much distance between them for ease, and Lena was not a person who performed warmth she hadn't earned or been given. They sat together for an hour. He did not apologize for the family structure or the weight of the name she had spent her life avoiding. He apologized for what her mother had carried alone. Lena did not forgive quickly, but she stayed. She came back the following week, and the week after that. Her first formal act as a verified Hargrove Legacy Fund beneficiary was quiet. She approved a 5-year operating grant for Linden House's legal aid program for adults experiencing financial abuse. Not a one-time gift, but a sustained commitment with a review structure and accountability reporting. Agnes received the notice on a Tuesday morning. She read it twice. She set it down. She cried briefly. In the private office, where she had held an envelope for 11 years against the possibility that the night it was written for would eventually arrive. She did not let the residents see. Later that afternoon, Lena stopped by with the paperwork completed. Agnes made coffee. They sat across from each other in the same 2 chairs, where a woman had arrived in the rain with cancelled cards and 1 small suitcase, and they drank it without saying very much, which was enough. Lena took the platinum compass pendant and placed it in a small frame on the desk in her new office, not the Hargrove Capital offices, which she visited once a week on her own schedule, but her own space, the consultancy she was rebuilding under her own name. She hung it where she could see it, not because it proved she belonged to a billionaire family, because it reminded her of the night she stopped asking the wrong people to tell her she was worth something. Patrick had left her at a shelter and believed she had nowhere to go. He had not understood that some doors only open for people who have finally stopped begging to be let back into the wrong house. If you were Lena, would you have taken his apology or walked away for good? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, you already know what to do.